So the interview is one opportunity for the medical school to get to know you and figure out if you're the best person for their class. And you can sort of provide that perspective in multiple ways. The interview is one way, but we encourage that you follow up with the institution and give them additional opportunities to get to know you. I'm just going to be covering some of the things that interviewers look for when they're interviewing many of you before you go on your interview. However, I want to give a little bit of context beforehand. As you know, once you start applying, you may apply to several medical schools, and it's good to know how competitive it is. So at the medical school I work at, we receive about 4,000 applications a year for a class of about 160. Pretty competitive, huh? So you definitely want to consider applying to several medical schools. On average, people apply to 50 or even potentially 20 or more than that. Of the 4,000 applicants, 1,000 are invited to interview. Of the 1,000 that interview, 1 in 4 are accepted. So it's not only about submitting an application to show that you're a competitive applicant and making sure that application is complete, but it's also rocking the interview, right? Because it's really 1 in 4 that end up receiving that acceptance letter, or hopefully several acceptance letters. So what do we look for? So on this slide here, it sort of itemizes various characteristics that we look for when we're interviewing an individual. When I interview, there's certain things that I tend to focus on as an emergency medicine physician. One of the things is how well do you work in a team dynamic? Actually, to provide the best possible care, we work in a team dynamic. I often work with social workers because our clients or our patients have a lot of social issues. I rely very heavily on our nurses, our physician assistants, and other individuals that make up that team. And it's really the only way to get through certain situations, especially if you're seeing 15 or 20 patients at one time. So one of the questions I may ask is, have you ever worked in a team dynamic, and what skills did you gain from that experience?
The interview is really the opportunity for the school to kind of make sure that it's all coming together and make sure that what you're writing is congruent and, like the young lady said, that you're somebody who's going to bring the personal touch that they're looking for. You're going to be in a class for 4 years, sometimes more, and they want to make sure that you're a good fit for that school. A lot of schools also take seriously their mission to their local communities, but the interview also serves the other purpose, which is for you, and finding out whether or not the school can provide a supportive environment where you're going to thrive, where you're going to be successful, and whether it's going to really set you up for your next step, because you think this is the biggest thing, and then once you get to med school, you got to think about the next step and the next step, and you want to make sure that the school's going to provide the opportunities that you're going to need to set up your next step in your career, whether that be research, whether that be a clinical, whether that's something more in academia or public health, policy. So you want to look for all of those factors. So one of the ways that you can prepare is by reading through your materials, reading through your personal statements. Most of the time you won't have access to your letters of recommendation, so you really have to go on the items that you've prepared yourself. And you want to be able to recall fine details. You want to be able to put some of those stories into a 3 or 4 sentence blurb that you can sort of repeat, and that is going to be concise and clear and really convey the passion or the inspiration that you found and that you're writing on paper.
A few things that I want to really hit on are, number one, all of us have bad habits. If you're anxious or nervous, some people, play the itsy bitsy spider with their hand while they're sitting in the chair. Some people like to twirl their hair in their hand. Some people are always cracking their knuckles, tapping their foot, or, tapping the desk, or twirling, pins or other things in their fingers. These are bad habits that in an interview distract the interviewer from you and have the interviewer focus on whatever it is that you're doing. And when they do that, they're not remembering you during your interview. So when you walk out of the room, all they'll remember is there was this person that was twirling their hair. What was their name? I don't know. They won't listen to your story. They won't listen to your interview. They won't remember you. So when it comes time to bring you before the committee, all they'll have is the name, but they won't know who you are. So be sure that you know what your bad habits are, what your tails are, and then be cognizant of that during the interview so that when you get to the point where you're nervous and you feel like you're going to start it up, you'll know that it's going to start and stop yourself from doing it. Another thing it's important to do, get rest. Please get rest the night before your interview. Don't go to a rave the night before. Don't stay up at some late party, partying, getting drunk. You want to be alert, awake, and make a very good impression when they see you at the interview site. If you walk in there and you're asleep or having a hard time staying awake at your interview, it gives them the impression that you're not that interested in the program, and they're not going to be that interested in trying to get you to stay.
One last thing to keep in mind about the interview is that it won't always be a one-on-one interview like what we showed. You will often be placed in a situation where you'll meet with a faculty member, whether that be a physician, a clinical faculty, or a science faculty. These are often your professors of biochemistry or your professors of anatomy. So be aware that there are going to be a lot of different people involved. Medical schools are looking for things that set you apart, and we're going to have a session a little bit later called Outside the Numbers, but we talk specifically about this because once you get to the point where you're offered an interview, keep in mind that you're competing against people who all have good grades, who all have great letters of recommendations, they're all involved in activities, and there's really very little that distinguishes one person from the other on paper. So yes, we want to hear your story and we want to know what's unique about you, what are you going to bring to the medical school class, what's going to make you a great physician, and all of those things are influenced by who we are, who we grew up with, how we grew up. All of those things really shape who you end up becoming at the end of this long process.